Hello, welcome back to Hunter Tuned. Today we're going to be tearing down the Grom engine out of the blue bike behind me. We actually just did a removal of the engine, and now we're gonna disassemble the engine in preparation for the 4-valve build. So we have to take the engine down pretty much to bare case to install a new crankshaft, and we're also gonna be changing the transmission to a 5-speed instead of the stock 4-speed, which really kind of sucks, in my opinion at least. This one, I don't know if I got a Monday built bike or a Monday built motor on this one, but the transmission is just really sloppy, and it pops out a third once in a while, and it's only got 700 miles on it. So we're gonna be changing it over to that Takagawa 5-speed. But anyways, we're gonna just get to it and start tearing this thing down, and I'm gonna just go through some steps of what I do to remove the parts, and yeah, go from there. So to start, we'll probably get this throttle body and intake manifold off. So we just got 2 Allen head screws on this. This is not a stock intake and stuff, but it's the same principle on your bike, I would assume. You might not have Allen heads, you might have 8mm bolts instead. So there we go, throttle body. We're just gonna get kind of like the stuff around the outside of the engine off, starter, intake, you know, stuff like that first. So now we're getting the rev wedge off, which really we don't even have to pull this stuff. I'm just pulling it off because I'm selling all these parts individually, and I want to take them off to take pictures of them. But technically you could probably leave the throttle body and intake attached to the head and just pull the entire head. Next I'll probably just get the starter up out of the way. So there's 10mm bolt we took out already, the one I'm taking out with my hand. We had to take this out to get the ground wire off of the engine harness on the bike. I just put the bolt in so I wouldn't lose it. So, and then you got another 10mm down there. You can wiggle the starter up out of the way. Sometimes you might need to take like a little screwdriver or a pry bar, get back in here to pop it, because there's an O-ring that seals it. And this sucks because I still don't have a good setup to do this, because I'm holding the camera with one hand and this is my hand that I can wrench with. So I'm still trying to figure out a good way to do this. Hang on, let me prop you up on this chair. There we go. Now I can do this, and there we go. Got the starter out. Put that up there with its bolts. Next, I'm just yanking off these breather hoses. This one goes on the case, and then I have one on this vented cam cover. All right, so we got 2 8mm bolts on the cam cover down here. Sorry, you can't really see, but there it is, the cam cover. Gonna get these bolts removed. There's one on the top and one on the bottom, and the stock cam cover is the same way. You would need to take this off to do your cam swap if you were doing a cam and a Grom. So I'll pop this guy off. Same thing, take a screwdriver, kind of wedge it back here, get that stuff to come out. All right, so next we can probably get the timing chain tensioner on the bottom of the engine removed, or we can just wiggle this gear off. So we could pop the cam sprocket bolt. It's a 12mm. If you don't have an impact, you just have to shove like a screwdriver or something in here to hold it so it doesn't turn when you're trying to loosen it, and then this kind of just falls off. You got to take the chain off of the gear down in here, and then the gear will slide out. So we'll put the bolt with the gear like that. And now we can take off the head, and we can pretty much take off the rest of the top end, honestly. But we're gonna take off 2 8mm bolts on the side of the head right here. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. There's the two long 8mm head bolts. And then the head studs on a stock bike, I believe, are a 10mm. You could just get them with a little ratchet. I'm just going to lightly use the impact on this guy. You don't want to put a motor together with an impact, but you could take one apart with it. Alright, now the cylinder head will come off. Just like that. Make sure not to lose the little dowel pins. There should be two in the jug, the cylinder, that go on the head here and here. And then we'll take out, there's a bolt on the side here that has another timing chain guide pulley in the jug. So we're going to take that out. There's a little copper washer. Then we can slide the jug off of the case. And then on the bottom of the jug, there's also two more dowel pins. Make sure you put those back so you don't lose them. Here's that pulley that sits in the jug, in the cylinder. It sits right in here. Where the chain goes, this pulley slides right in here and bolts through here. And then also on the jug, you'll have your temperature sensor, your engine temp sensor right there, which you'll probably have to swap if you change cylinders or whatever. You'll have to change that over to the new cylinder, because a lot of the new cylinders do not come with a sensor. So next we will remove the piston and the studs out of the case. Now you can take two nuts and thread them together and then tighten them together and back it out that way, or you could take a vice grips and try not to scar up the stud too much. Alright, so I got the studs out of the case. The smaller ones, there's two different lengths of stud here. There's two small ones, two long ones. The smaller ones go on the left side and the longer ones go on the right side. So got those out of the way. I actually ended up just using a regular pliers here and just cranking them out. Some of them were a little tighter than others, so it might take a little bit of persuasion to get those studs out of there, but it's a lot easier to work on the piston and everything else without the studs in the way, in my opinion. So, and then here's the timing chain. Just kind of leave that there for now. So we're gonna get the piston removed. Probably just use like a needle nose pliers and get the little clip out. Sometimes you can take a like a little pick to walk it around the little ridge where it sits in, or maybe a screwdriver. I'm just gonna use this small needle nose pliers. There we go. Didn't damage it, just pull slowly, don't yank them out. So now that one clip is removed, we can remove the piston completely by taking the wrist pin and pulling it out of the rod. Sometimes you can get lucky and pull on it with the pliers from this side. Or take a screwdriver from the other side and push it out. So I'm just going to take an 8mm socket and just give it a couple taps, light taps. I took both clips out to do this because this pin is a little sticky. But there we go. There's our piston. This is a big bore piston, TB 186 kit. Now I'm just going to take off some of the sensors. So there's a sensor here and a sensor here. One has an 8mm bolt, one has a 10mm bolt. Took out this top one. Same thing, just get the screwdriver under here a little bit. and kind of pry up to pop it out. There we go. Here's the other sensor. This is your neutral indicator. And there's also a spring and like a little nut, or like a little thing behind it. Right here. Looks like that. So next I'm going to take off the timing cover. Just a couple 8 mils all around the perimeter here. Boom, 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 boom. And these bolts are different lengths, so just be sure to label what length bolt goes where. You can get a piece of cardboard and draw the pattern of the bolts and then stick the bolt through the cardboard. I don't do that, but you could. I just kind of put the bolt where I think it needs to go when I reassemble, and then I'm like, oh, this one's too long, or this one's not long enough. Because you can tell by kind of looking at the cover, like how much bolt needs to be there, because part of the cover is thicker than others where the bolts go through. So that's how I tell what bolt goes where, but you can do whatever way makes you feel comfortable. And there is a couple brackets and a couple wire holders on the timing cover here, like this one for example. That looks like this. This holds the wiring for the kickstand sensor. And then there's some on the front of the engine, or like closer to the top end, that hold the wiring for like the engine temp and stuff like that. So I'm getting the last bolt out here, and this cover will not really want to come off that easy because the flywheel is inside and it's got a magnet. So the magnet is going to want to repel as you try to pull it off. Just keep pulling, it'll come off. And here is the stator with the 4th bearing mod that I already put in this bike. Yeah. So we'll just put our bolts in the cover here so we don't lose them. We'll set that off to the side. And now we have access to the flywheel and our starter gear. So the starter gear is going to pop out. Just pull the pin on the starter gear and then that'll come out. Looks like this. And then the spacer goes on this side. We'll talk about that when I reassemble this thing, but we're just kind of taking it apart for now. And then you'll have to bust off the flywheel, which is a 14. Like I said, if you don't have an impact, they make a flywheel holder, which I have. I'll show you guys real quick. Pretty much just a big strap wrench that fits around the flywheel here. You tighten it down and then you wedge it against your bench or table, whatever you're working on. And this will hold the flywheel steady. So when we reassemble, you can torque the flywheel. Then to remove the flywheel, you need this tool. It's an M30 by 1.5 thread pitch, and it has a bolt that goes through the center of it that pushes on the crankshaft to remove the flywheel. So you just thread this guy onto the flywheel like this, and then you tighten up the center bolt, and that in turn pulls the flywheel off of the crank because these are pressed on. So we're going to tighten this down with the impact. There we go. Now our flywheel is removed. You got a little sprag clutch on the back side. And then this is the starter gear. So when the starter spins, it only spins one way. And this guy fits together like this. You just kind of pop and turn, and it only turns one way. Now we have access to our timing chain and the gears and everything like that, so I'm going to get the chain up out of here. There's a chain. And then you got some timing gears in here. We will get these all removed. So this is the top tensioner arm. The timing chain tensioner pushes on this side, and then the gear on this side pushes the chain to tension it. And then this is just a guide pulley that sits on the bottom. I'll show you here. So the lower one goes right there, and then the tensioner arm goes right there. Like I said, we'll probably show more if you guys are interested. Assembling where all this stuff goes when you reassemble it. Alright guys, so this is another piece that sits in the case. It's just a little bracket holder stay piece that holds this little spring back here. So you have to make sure that you don't lose this, and this goes with the little stay. I don't think there's anything else back there. I think it's just that little spring. So just right there is where that little spring sits, and then this little holder stay piece holds that spring in. So now everything is removed on this side other than the timing chain tensioner, which we will remove next. I think a stock one just has like a little spring. It sits on the bottom of the engine, and it's like a 14 mil, and there's a spring and like a little Teflon thing that pushes against that. This is an aftermarket one, and we'll just get this guy removed.
He had the monster game and that like, cinematic condition in the Big House against Ohio State.
So there's the tensioner removed. Next, we're flipping the engine over to the clutch cover side. So we're going to remove the clutch cover bolts and get this guy off. There we go, there's the clutch cover removed. I might use a head cam on the next video doing the install, like putting the engine back together. But for now, all I have is this camera, so I feel bad that some of the footage might not be the best. But anyways, I'm taking the clutch off next, and I'm taking the 3 bolts out of the plate here and wedging like a penny or a quarter in between these 2 gears so that the clutch doesn't turn when I try to spin it. So just taking these out. You got to do a little bit at a time on each one. Don't take one all the way out. You got to work in a pattern, a little bit on each one, because this is under spring pressure. The clutch springs are under this little plate. And this is a 6-bolt plate with only 3 bolts in it, because the my clutch basket is messed up on this bike. Still works, but it's better to have all 6. And the bike or the motor is going to leak some oil when you do this, just because even when you drain the oil, you're not going to get all of it out through the drain plug, unfortunately. There we go, there's our clutch plate. Here's all our springs. You can see I got to fix this basket because it's got a stripped out bolt from over tightening it. So there's our springs, and then we also need a special tool to get the clutch off. So I have that in my toolbox. Looks something like this with 4 teeth on it that kind of sit on the bolt for the clutch. So we'll hit this with an impact to get that off. I just put a little friction on it with a rag so it wouldn't spin. You don't want to put your bare hands on that shit because it'll cut you like a knife. So here's the nut and washer. Then we got to take out the two 10 mil bolts for the oil sling. It's like a windage tray. And then this will all slide up as one unit with the windage tray. You have to put this in with the clutch together, otherwise you won't be able to get this in. Putting all the springs back in the clutch so I don't lose it. There's my penny that I used to wedge in there. And then underneath the clutch, you're gonna have two spacers. So there's a small spacer and a wider spacer. And they sit on there like this. So the big one goes on the bottom, the small one goes on the top. Big as in girth, not length. Then we can remove our oil pump, which is just three 10 millimeter bolts. Give you guys a look here. So you got your oil pump here, taking out the 3 bolts that hold it in. And then normally you'd have an oil spinner right here. I have the oil spinner delete because I have the clutch cover on it. And I'm assuming if you're building a Grom engine, you're not going to run that frickin' oil spinner. It frees up a lot of weight, rotating weight. So we could wiggle the oil pump out. There we go. Set that in there. And then we'll probably take off the oil spinner next. So you got to hold one end with a wrench and then take off the nut on the top. So I'm going to leave the big wrench kind of wedged here like this. Socket on the top. I'll hit that with the impact real quick. There we go, we got a nut, washer, and then this guy is splined that sits on there. So we'll leave that in order. Set it over here. And then you have your oil pump, or not the oil pump, this is the clutch gear. That comes off first. Hopefully you guys can see. So this is keyed. There's a keyway on the crankshaft that goes with this gear. And it looks like the blue dot is going up, the letter up. Typically whenever there's lettering or a dot on anything in an engine, you always want to face it up. And then we have a spacer right here. And then the oil pump gear, which is this little tiny one on the bottom, which I think is just a pin on the crank. Yeah. So I'm going to take that little pin. Take that little pin out on the crank down here. Little pin. Don't want to lose that. Keep that with the oil pump gear. So now we're going to start taking the shifter out. This little assembly in here. There's an Allen head up top. I'll have to bust that out of there first. Which is just like a big washer. Like that. And then behind it, you have your shift star, which you just want to pull out ever so slightly, because there's pins in the front of it, and then there's pins in the back of it that hold it to the shift drum. So you just want to make sure that the pins that go in the shift drum stay with the shift star. So I'm just putting those back in the shift star. And then the rest of this can come out. A couple 12 mil bolts. $10 mil, my bad. So this little arm is what with the shifter, when you feel it click into gear, this holds it into gear. It's got a little spring and a washer. That guy goes right there in the case. And then this deal will just pull out this whole little shift linkage. So that comes out. We'll set all that aside. There's some chunks of metal in this thing. Like I said, the tranny really shifted like crap, so this almost looks like something in this was assembled wrong out of the box. That is hilarious. I almost wonder if this like spring thing, because all of this is like parts of the spring. And I never took this apart. This was out of the factory. And those bolts were actually really tough to come out. So, yeah. Anyways, next, could probably split the case. So we'll have to flip it over once again, because on the clutch cover side, we're pretty much all done, minus the stud that holds the shift linkage. That stud is still in the case, which is not a big deal. We can leave that in for now. And we really don't need to take it out, I don't think. So then the case bolts are pretty simple. You just got one here, one here, one here, one on the outside here, 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 here. Yeah, that's it. So I'm gonna pull all those bolts out. I'll get back with you in a second. All right, guys, I just got all the case bolts removed, the ones that I was telling you about. There's also this bolt right here with a copper washer. I'm just gonna leave it in the case for now. And we're just gonna give this thing a couple taps. Typically on the bottom where there's a lot of beef, you can kind of just give it a couple whacks. Now we have it split a little bit. I'll take a screwdriver and kind of gently pry it the rest of the way off, working my way around the perimeter. There's also dowels on the clutch cover and the timing cover that you got to make sure go back. And there is dowels in the case as well, so you got to make sure you can work them out. They can be a little sticky. So I'm going to try to just yank up on this thing a little bit. So I got one screwdriver wedged in one side. Now I'm going to go on the other side and do the same. There we go. Now it's off of the dowels. I just had to have, you know, a screwdriver on each side to be able to get it to fully pop off of those dowels, like I was saying. So there we go. This is one case half with the crank in it, and then the other case half has the transmission in it. So I'll pull this transmission out, the shift drum, all of it comes out as one assembly, so just grab all of it and pull straight up. try to keep it all together as one unit like this, which I kind of failed to do. But I know where that one goes. Okay. So there's all the transmission gears, which we'll talk about on the assembly. And that's it. Got her all apart. I'm gonna be building the transmission and putting a crank in it, so we'll talk about that stuff in the next video. And I'm gonna clean up my mess here, get this all organized, so we are ready to reassemble and make this bike even better. So yeah, here's the one case half. And the other case half with the crank is sitting over here. I'm gonna get all this stuff washed up. So yeah, there we go. Got a mess of parts. I'm gonna clean all this stuff up, kind of get it, or I kind of have it laid out, you know, where I pulled it out, you know, studs left, right, bolts for all this over here, clutch, my hands full of oil, head, you know, I'll have to clean up the oil, and then here's the cases, which we're going to work on right away first, get them cleaned up, get the new crank in, and stuff like that. So you guys will have to stay tuned for the next video. I appreciate you watching. If you made it to the end, be sure to leave a like. Hopefully this helps somebody out. And yeah, I'm gonna try to start building these things for customers too. So figured I'd make some engine building videos with them and show what you can do with them. So anyways, have a great night and better tomorrow, guys. Thanks for watching.